filming today for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive in Sarasota, Florida, and it is extreme great pleasure to have Louie Bellson with us, drummer extraordinaire and band leader and arranger. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have just about done it all in your career, and you're still doing it, as I just had the pleasure of hearing. How did all this come about? Did you start as a piano player as a child? Did I read that?
Actually, no. I come from a musical family.
Yeah.
My father played all instruments at a music store, and there were 8 of us, 4 girls, 4 boys, and all of us worked in the music store. And when I was about 3.5 years old, my father took me to a parade, and you know, for a little person, 3.5 years old, and that drum section comes by you, you know, that whole sound envelops your whole body. So I pointed my little finger, I said, I want to play that. So my dad said I was so definite about it, and he was very liberal-minded as far as wanting to start at a certain time. Didn't make any difference as long as you had the interest and you wanted to do it, start, you know. So he started me, and eventually I had teachers like Roy Knapp in Chicago, and then later on with Murray Spivak in Los Angeles. But in the meantime, by the time I got to be about 13 years old, he kind of maneuvered me over to the piano. Not to play piano as a solo instrument, naturally. He just thought it was time for me to learn theory and harmony and composition, and I was against that. But the minute I started and got into it, then I realized that, yeah, I like this, because there's something inside of me that says compose and arrange as well as play drums. So that's what I did. I kept studying hard with my father, and then later on, when I got on the road, I had Buddy Baker, who just retired from Disney Studios as one of their great composers. I started with him in 1947, and he's still my teacher. We do things like decipher Ravel's Daphnis and Chloe, bar by bar, this kind of thing. You know? But it's a never-ending process, you know. You just keep on learning, and that's the exciting thing about music.
Well, the piano was a good idea then.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Because my father said, you know, it's all right to play percussion, play drums, that's wonderful, but someday, if you're a band leader, you'll have respect for your men more if you rehearse the band. Don't have somebody else rehearse it. You get out there in front and say, well, let's see, that's a G minor 7/4, and somebody's playing a D natural instead of a B flat.
Yeah.
And so he was right.
They go, oh, a drummer knows that, yes.
And a lot of the young drummers, well, some of the older guys, like Tony Khan was a great orchestrator and great arranger. And today, Billy Cobham, Steve Gadd, Tony Williams, a lot of these guys are composing and writing, and Harvey Mason, drummers like that, you know, who are not only great percussion players, but they're very sensitive as to what music is all about.
And when was it that you really felt that you could become a professional musician?
Well, I was very fortunate. They allowed me to join the union in Moline, Illinois, when I was 14 years old. However, in order to play the gigs at that time, you had to play in a little beer joint, you know. I had to be accompanied by a grown-up. He had to get me there, help me set up the drums and sit there, make sure I didn't get indulged in alcohol, and played the gig, and then he got me back home. But that was a great experience, because one of the greatest things that happened to me, on every Tuesday night in Moline, there was a nightclub called the Rendezvous, and Spec Red, the great piano player from Des Moines, Iowa, had a drummer and a bass player and a saxophone player from Kansas City. A wonderful quartet. And they allowed me to come in and sit in and play with them all night on Tuesday. Now that's where you really learn how to swing, because when you play with a quartet like that, in front of a live audience, on stage, with other instrument players, then you really know about when to use this cymbal, how to use the brushes, be sensitive to backing up soloists. And that was really setting me up. So by the time I was 17 years old, I was ready to go on the road.
That was a perfect education at that point in your
It was.
career then.
Because
Yeah.
you can, school is wonderful. The schooling is very, very important. Education and music and just academic education is
Mhm.
marvelous. But you also have to get that training of going in and playing on the stage with other players. That you have to go out, what we used to call, get your feet wet.
Yeah.
Climb on a bus and do some one-nighters, play in ballrooms, play in theaters, play in nightclubs.
Mhm.
And that's where you get the feel of the real music. You know?
Yeah. Well, you went through a real succession of great big bands, and you must have been popular because you hit them all.
I was very fortunate. Back home, when I was 14, 15, and 16 years old, there used to be a couple of places, one in Moline and one in Davenport, where all the big bands came to play, the big ballrooms. Coliseum in Davenport in particular. And every time a band like Ted Williams or Harry James or Ted Fiorito, I'm naming some of the old guys now, all the kids would go, hey, let Louis play the drums. You know? So the band leader would always say, yeah, okay, where is he? And then I'd get up and I'd play, you know. So when I got up and played for Ted Fiorito, he offered me a job right there.
Wow.
And I said, well, Ted, I got like 3 or 4 more months of high school. I want to get my diploma. I wanted to go to college, but if you offer me a gig
Yeah.
and some money, maybe I'll change my mind.
Right.
But I want to graduate from high school. So he waited and kept his word. His drummer was leaving anyway.
Mhm.
And the first gig was to fly out to Los Angeles from Moline, Illinois, and play the Florentine Gardens on Hollywood Boulevard, which is a beautiful, big, they don't have places like that anymore, where they had a line of girls there. They had the Mills Brothers were the main attraction, Ted Fiorito's big band, Dr. Giovanni the pickpocket, famous pickpocket,
Oh.
and tremendous big show. I was there for 3 months in that place,
Mhm.
and while I was there, Freddie Goodman, Benny Goodman's brother, just happened to wander in and take in the show, and he liked the way I played. He sent a note over to me, and I went over to the table, and he said, you know, Benny Goodman is out here making a motion picture, and he's looking for a drummer.
You were what, 17 or something?
I started to freeze up. I'm thinking, you know, here Ted got me all the way from home. I
Yeah.
hit him within 3 months.
Yeah.
Now I get the offer to go with the King of Swing. So my audition was not really an audition. I didn't go somewhere in a room or play for Benny.
Mhm.
All he did was tell Freddie, take him in, put a tuxedo on him, put the makeup on him, and I'll see him on the set. So
Oh
we
my
played
God.
one small band tune on the set, motion picture. After we played the tune, Benny said, okay, kid, we leave Thursday for New York.
Amazing.
I didn't have a chance to say, well, whoa, wait a minute, hold it, you know. Hold it, you know. So he just said, I'll see you Thursday. So Freddie said, well, you got the job. Now, what am I gonna say to Ted Fiorito? Well, I told all the guys in the band, and they said, look, Ted will be angry at first, but you go ahead and go, and we'll explain to him later on what the situation is. So that's what happened. You know, I saw him
That's
months
classic.
later, and he said, that was great. He said, but however, you know, I thought maybe you'd stay with me a little longer.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience
Yeah.
joining Benny's band.
And this was what year? Around?
That had to be 42,
Mhm.
42, I think, 1942, yeah.
Amazing. And you probably toured around the country quite a bit with him.
Yeah, I did just under a year with Benny, then Uncle Sam got me.
Mm.
But I was very fortunate. They looked at my credentials, having worked with Benny Goodman. I was supposed to go to Marsh Field with Ziggy Elman's band in California.
Mhm.
Instead, they shipped me to Washington, D.C. With an excellent band. Big orchestra, concert band, marching band, big jazz band, small combos. So I actually did a lot of playing when I was in the service for 3 years. And we were stationed at Walter Reed Hospital. And we had to play for all those amputees that came back from the
Mhm.
war. And the best medicine they could have was to hear American jazz or any kind of music. You know, it could be symphonic music, chamber music, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And I played more drum solos for those guys than I ever did back in civilian life.
Uh-huh.
So that was a nice experience. 3 years for Uncle Sam. And then when I got out, I went back with Ted Fiorito for about, maybe 3 or 4 months again, then back with Benny Goodman.
No kidding.
That had to be in 46.
Did you give him like a week's notice this time? When you
Yeah, I gave him proper notice this
Yeah.
time. Yeah. I played it straight this time.
Yeah.
Then after that, Benny was kind of semi-retired, and he was going to go back to New York and not do too much, so
Mm-hmm.
that left an opening for me to join Tommy Dorsey in 1947. And that was a great experience. Wonderful band. He had people in there like Charlie Shavers, a great trumpet player. Ziggy Elman was still in the band then. Paul Smith on piano.
Uh-huh.
And Tommy himself was just superb, I stayed with him for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then joined Harry James for 1 year out in California. I wanted to go to California to study with Buddy Baker, who's presently my composition teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And the 1 year with Harry was great. And then all of a sudden, in that band, they had Willie Smith playing lead alto and Juan Tizo, the great valve trombonist,
Mm-hmm.
used to be with Duke. And I stayed at Juan Tizo's house. So Juan said, I got to talk to you and Willie because I just talked to Duke Ellington today. I said, really? Yeah. He said, yeah, he's looking for a lead alto player. Johnny Hodges is leaving, and he's also looking for a drummer. So now what do we say to Harry James? So all three of us went to Harry James. We said, Harry, of course, we had an out with Harry because he wasn't working every night. He was working like Fridays and Saturdays, and that's about it, just weekends. We said, Harry, all three of us said, we have a chance to join Duke Ellington's band. So he looked at us, hesitated for about 15 seconds, and he said, take me with you. I'll never forget those words.
Oh,
But
that's-
he was a great man. Harry was a
Uh-huh.
great player and sensational
Yeah.
man besides, But I did get a chance to work with him for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, after that, of course, with Ellington, there's so many stories to tell about that band.
He-
And Ellington himself was an element of surprise, always, because you never knew exactly what monumental piece of music he was doing for a certain occasion that other bands didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
Beside the ballrooms and the theaters and television coming in, we were in on the first sacred concert
Sacred
that was
concert.
done in Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. So just to be a part of that was something, I look back at that as really an experience.
Mhm. People talk about the difference in discipline and the way you lead a band between certain guys like Benny Goodman and Ellington, I guess, had his own way of dealing with his personnel.
All those band leaders had a different way. But the great thing about Basie and Ellington, when you analyze their situation, they were both rhythm section players, piano players.
Mhm.
And when they beat off a band, unless they were doing something in television where they had to give a downbeat or something like that, but normal playing, swing, they played with the rhythm section for 1, maybe 2 courses until that groove settled in.
Mhm.
Then, by the time the band came in, there's no question where the time was. Rather than give it 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes that's a little offhand to try to capture that tempo right off the bat.
Sure.
You have to have a strong rhythm sections to lock it in right away, see. But with them, being rhythm section players, that made a great difference. And that's why it was such a joy to work for them, because they established tempo, and they were both so tempo conscious, but they had a natural flair for knowing exactly what tempo for this tune, what tempo for that tune.
Mm-hmm.
They were masters with that.
Something to learn from
Oh, yeah.
Basie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting back to Ellington for a moment, did you get a chance to see Ellington and Strayhorn, how they collaborated on their music? It seems like such a fascinating thing, the way they pulled that off.
Mm-hmm. Well, Strayhorn joined Ellington as a lyricist. And from what I hear, and Billy Strayhorn told me that I don't think Duke knew at first that he arranged
Oh,
as a lyricist. So Duke gave Strayhorn an assignment for lyrics, and he said, "I'll check you out when I get back. We got to go to Europe." So when they came back from Europe, Billy said, "I write arrangements also." So Duke said, "Really?" He said, "Do you have one?" He said, "Yeah." And that was Take the A Train. And I think Strayhorn told me that Duke put his arm around Strayhorn and said, "You're with me forever."
wow.
But, you know, that was a perfect match because
Mhm.
nobody in that band, even the guys that have been there for years, like Harry Carney, they couldn't tell the difference whether Strayhorn wrote the composition
Mhm.
or whether Duke did. That's how close it was.
Amazing.
They were an exceptional twosome. I would say they were both geniuses, really.
Mhm.
Very superstitious.
Yeah.
Don't ever whistle in the dressing room. Duke and Strayhorn never put a button, a fine on an arrangement. They got down the letter S and then just let it fizzle out. Then they worked it out at the rehearsal. But never really put, like, boom, the finale there.
They didn't write it, you mean?
They didn't
wouldn't
write
write it.
They worked it out at rehearsal. See? And never wore a shirt with buttons all the way down. It was only maybe 3 buttons this way and then a slip over. And no color yellow. Blue was his favorite color. And I made the mistake once of giving him a gift for his birthday, a pair of bedroom shoes. He said, no, don't do that, don't do that. That means you're going to be walking out of my life.
No kidding.
I said, oh, really? And so I exchanged those for a blue sweater. But they both had that great originality that you look for, you strive for, and it came natural for them. But, you know, Ellington never really went to school to learn how to write music, and Strayhorn may have had a little bit, but they had that God-given talent to be able to sit down and write music, but it was strictly their style. They weren't getting it from somebody else. It was, there it was. You know, the voicings in the reed section, the voicings in the brass section, being able to supply the band, the soloists. He knew every soloist, what their range was, so when he wrote something for you, it was perfect. Just like you getting a brand new set of clothes and they fit perfect.
Yeah.
And he gave you the greatest introductions in the world. It really sets you up, you know. One thing, when I joined the band, Strayhorn and I roomed together for about almost 3 weeks. And I made the mistake of telling Strayhorn one night, we were just talking, and I said, Strayhorn, how did Duke voice that Caravan thing? Boy, man, I could really see the camels coming when they played that one part. And he went like this to me, I said, oh, excuse me, I'm invading your privacy. So I didn't say a word. And I guess Strayhorn had talked to Duke about me, asked and so forth. And nothing happened for about 3 or 4 months, and all of a sudden, we were doing a one-nighter, and Duke got up on the piano, this before the people came in, and he said, come here, to me, sit down by the piano. And
He showed you.
he explained to me how he voiced Caravan, what notes he gave to Johnny Hodges, what notes he gave to Prokop, Carney, so forth. This is what I did. So I thought to myself, man, there's a great Duke Ellington that's taking time out to show me some voicings.
Yeah.
Other band leaders have been striving, trying to figure out, what did he do there? How did he voice that?
I read a quote from Andre Previn, who said, 1,000 musicians can get together and play a chord, and that Stan Kenton wrote, and all the arrangers know how to do that. And Duke Ellington writes something for 3 instruments, and they play it, and I don't know what it is.
When you can write in harmony and theory, it's really much easier to write for 4 voices or 5 voices, but to write for 3 voices and 2 voices, because he had 3 trombone players, and those 3 trombone players sounded like about 5 or 6 of them sometimes, you know. But I found after working with the band, I discovered that in a very short time that you could have Ellington's band playing an arrangement, and then have another choice band, maybe like a New York band or an LA band, all great musicians playing the same chart, but the difference, the air that they're putting in their horns, Carney,
Mhm.
Willie Smith, Johnny Hodges, Paul Gonzalez, Jimmy Hamilton, Clark Terry, Juan Tizo, Lawrence Brown, Tricky Sam. This is something that you can't explain, but the way they played it, the way they made it sound, that was it.
Didn't they play some of your first charts?
When I joined the band, Tizo was telling Duke, yeah, this kid, he knows how to write too. He said, well, tell him to bring an arrangement in. I said, Tizo, no way, I'm not going to do that. Not with him a straight horn around. I would feel just this high, you know.
Yeah.
So he had to ask me 2 or 3 times. So finally, Tizo got a hold of Hawk Talks and Skin Deep, and when Duke heard Hawk Talks, they recorded it right off the bat.
What a
And
thrill.
I was
What a
just,
thrill.
as a kid, I couldn't get over it, you know. And it enjoyed some success as a jazz cut, you know. And then later on, we couldn't find a studio in those days to record Skin Deep because all that drumming, they couldn't find a studio to get the clarity of all those fast beats that I was doing on Skin Deep. So Duke hesitated. He said, let's wait on that one. So while we were on the road, Bert Porter, who was one of the guys that brought in the Ampex Hi-Fi,
Oh.
he recorded the band one night in Fresno, California. And when Duke heard that, he said, okay, let's record Skin Deep. So we did that out on the coast and then sent that tape into Columbia. And they wanted to know where we did that.
Mhm.
Because he said, we couldn't do anything like that, you know. So if you look at or study that cut real closely, you'll discover that Skin Deep sounded very different than the other things on that
On the
Uptown
album.
album. And that's the reason why.
So it was recorded not in a studio, or was it
Not in the
recorded on
studio.
location or something?
We had finished playing Fresno. That's when we heard the recorded tape that Bert did, and we were on our way up to Seattle. Somewhere in there, we played a ballroom, and Duke liked the sound of the ballroom, so he said, "Okay, let's go down after the gig and do Skin Deep." And we did. We lucked out of it.
And this was in the 50s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 51.
Yeah.
1951, I joined the band. Shortly after that, we recorded the Hawk Talks and Skin Deep, yeah.
Was there ever any problem in certain parts of the country with any racial subjects coming up?
Well, yes, we did have. In 1951, they had the Big Show of 1951, which consisted of Nat King Cole, Sarah Vaughan, and Duke Ellington's band. They were the 3 big stars.
Mm-hmm.
Now, beside that, they had Peg Leg Bates, Timmy Rogers, Stumpin', Patterson and Jackson, all these wonderful acts, tap dancing acts. And it took us a week to rehearse that whole show, because playing with Nat King Cole and Sarah, Duke, and all these acts. So after we finished rehearsing for a week, Duke finally discovered that, hey, we're getting ready to go down to the Deep South, you know? And in those days, you had segregated audiences. And we couldn't, you couldn't play, whites couldn't play with the blacks at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days it was colored. They didn't use the word
Right.
blacks.
Mm-hmm.
So now the big problem is, Duke called me in the dressing room and said, what are we going to do? I can't find a drummer to take your place, because it would be a week's rehearsal, and the guys that can do it, they're all busy. So Duke says, you mind being an Haitian? I said, no, okay, that's all right, you know. So we got through it okay, you know. It was a little tense, but
Yeah.
because the situation was still down there,
Yeah.
and the audience were, because they told Jack Costanza with Nat King Cole he couldn't appear because of the racial thing, you know. But it was some spots it was
Yeah.
a little rough, you know. But we got through it. I think through Ellington's peaceful ways and the wonderful attitude that the band had, you know. kind of rubbed off on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it existed.
Yeah.
And you,
Well, it's nice that the music had a part
yeah.
in helping that situation to move
Yeah.
along a little faster, I
Well, you know,
guess.
we played a date in Mississippi, and there the townspeople were wonderful. They came to the rescue, where we couldn't stay in certain hotels and so forth. I mean, these people came from wealthy families too. They had Strayhorn and Duke and Clark Terry stayed in one house, and Carney and
Mm-hmm.
Russell Prokop and myself in another house, and all on down the line. Beautiful homes, they fed us. So, you know, along with the bad, there's some good too.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And these were situations that we got over.
Yeah.
We dealt with it. Sometimes it's almost like a slap in the face, but you realize what the situation is, and you go straight ahead
Mhm.
because you've got something to do that's valid.
Right.
And I think when you do that, you realize that none of those things should bother the musicality of something.
Mhm.
You know, the fact that whoever's playing that music doesn't make a difference. It's just let's play it and show where the peace and love is.
Right. I read some funny story about, did you room with Charlie Shavers for a while?
We were roommates for 3 years
Yeah.
in Tommy Dorsey's band.
Yeah.
There was another giant.
Uh-huh.
Great trumpet player, great arranger,
Mm-hmm.
great composer. He wrote Undecided and all those wonderful things with the John Kirby small group.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot rooming with Charlie. He taught me a lot about music,
Mm-hmm.
taught me some tap dance
Yeah.
steps. Of course, when you played the theater in those days, you did everything. You learned how to be an MC.
Uh-huh.
You learned how to get up and tell some jokes and
Right.
do a little shim sham shimmy and time step,
Yeah.
as well as play your instruments. You know.
Did he used to fall asleep in the tub or something like that? This
Yeah.
is something I read in one of these jazz books, and I just felt I had to ask you about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my two main teachers were Big Sid Catlett and Joe Jones.
Uh-huh.
I had a chance to see Chip once, but Big Sid and Joe really called me aside and said, look, here's how you play the brushes, here's how you do this, here's how you do this, and always remember, don't ever lose one. You know, I learned that from Dizzy too. What they meant was, when you play a 4-bar break, make sure everybody knows where 1 is, because once you lose 1, 2, 3, and 4 is gone, and it never comes back.
Right.
So you always, 1 is very important, you know?
Yeah. Oh. Well, what was your first association with Count Basie?
The first time with Basie, let me see, was actually when I joined Norman Granz, Jazz at the Philharmonic.
Mm-hmm.
I had known Basie before that because in 1951 he'd be appearing in New York at the Strand Theater, and we were at Birdland right across the street. And he used to come down. He said his own words were, I went straight to the bar and put my head down and with my hands around my head and just listened to you guys and getting madder and madder as I heard all this great music coming out of that band, you know, because he was a real Ellington fan, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Ellington was a big Basie fan. But I really started recording some small group things with Norman Granz, with the Trumpet Kings, and I was in on the 2 piano things with Oscar Peterson
Yeah.
and Basie. That was a great experience. And then, I forget what year, in the 60s, I was to go into Birdland with my small group, and Basie was going on a very important tour in Sweden for over a month, and Sonny Payne got very ill. So Basie said, "Can you do me a great favor?" I said, "Anything you ask." So we went to Morris Levy, who owned Birdland. He said, "Okay, we'll fix it out, Lou. I'll take care of your guys, and you can play the date when you get back." So I did about 5 weeks with that band and recorded with them. And that was like Ellington's band. Just a tremendous experience. I was talking to Frank West about that today, because he was on the band, and also Benny Powell. And Basie during that time was trying to straighten himself out, not too much alcohol, you know, and he knew that I didn't drink, and I had some goodies in my bag all the time to munch on.
Yeah.
Because over there in Europe, after 11 o'clock, everything closes, nothing, unless you know of a special place. So I stuck up on, I got my sardines together and apple juice and crackers and everything. And after the gig, it'd be a knock on my door, bam, 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 bam. I said, "Who's it?" Me, Basie. Now, you can imagine me sitting with Basie every night for about 4 or 5 hours, eating these little goodies and talking about life.
Oh, man.
That experience was, you know, it was just, between him and Ellington, it was something that if anybody had just one day with either one of them, that would be a blessing, you know.
Wow.
We laughed. He was a very funny man, you know, and could get really deep also. And his psychology was very simple, but so direct, so right, you know, just the way he played.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Big. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah, and you got to work with him in the different configurations, the Kansas City 6 and the 7, and a lot of great
Right.
albums.
And then they issued, while I was in Europe with him, we recorded 4 or 5 straight days in Copenhagen at the Tivoli Gardens. And that came out on Mosaic Records, all live Basie, live from Birdland with Sonny Payne and different drummers, and then the 4 days in Copenhagen. And man, that sounded so great.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a kick out of listening to myself, but listening to that band.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And that was...
When was your first attempt at putting your own band together? When did that come about?
Well, during my time with Ellington, before that, when I stayed at Teasdale's house, they always used to tell me about Pearl Bailey, because she was good friends with Teasdale's, and she occupied a room in the house also.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yes, I've heard of her, you know. I said, well, you two must meet, you know. So we finally met in D.C. at the Howard Theater, and that was in '51. And after 4 days, after I met her, 4 days, we decided to get married.
Wow.
We got married in London,
Uh-huh.
mainly because that band never took a vacation in Mass. There's always 2 or 3 guys at a time, but the band kept going.
Wow.
So my turn was up, and Pearl happened to be in London, so flew over there. We got married over there, you know. And that was a wonderful experience. She was a great lady, great performer.
Mhm.
38, almost 39 years.
Yeah.
And I felt that when she passed away, which was a big shock to all of us, you know, I thought,
Right.
well, I'm going to play my drums and no more, just straight ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And here I get another blessing. 3.5 years ago, I
It's
met
wonderful.
Francine on a wonderful cruise that we fly up to Vancouver and come back on the cruise, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Leonard Feather, we had all the
Oh, yeah.
Ellington guys on there. And I met her the last 2 days of the trip, you know. And we just hit it off, and here I am again.
That's
after
great.
3.5 years. But she's a physicist.
Fantastic.
She's an engineer.
Okay.
And
Now I can ask you about your shirt.
Yeah.
The
that's right.
shirt.
Well,
That,
she's
can we zero in on the shirt?
a graduate of MIT and Harvard.
Uh-huh.
And she worked for IBM for about 14 years. And she's a marvelous educator. And we take a lot of pride in going into schools now and
Mhm.
doing lectures. She'll talk about education and her life as a physicist, and then turn it over to me. Now I talk about Ellington and Basie. And,
Wow.
and if there's a set of drums there and a bass player or a piano player, then I do a little bit there.
Uh-huh.
And we have fun doing that. The kids love that
I'll bet.
because they get a duo thing going there, you know.
Great.
And it's, we do this besides me doing a clinic for the drummers and then doing a concert at night
Right.
with the band and so
Right.
forth. So, a lot of fun.
Well, you've been able to employ some pretty hot sidemen with your own band,
Yeah.
you know, and in addition to your own arranging, you've had some great contributions from people. Don Menza, you mentioned.
Don Menza, marvelous, a great player. He's borderline genius too. He really is. He's something else. He's a great player. Pete Chrisley, another saxophone player. Ricky Woodard now just joined us, and he's another great saxophone player. I got Conti Candoli playing with us, and his brother. Just Carl Fontana works with us now and then. Frank Struzari on piano, John Hurd on bass, and now I have 3 bands. You know, I have a New York band, Chicago band, and LA band. Because if I get a gig in New York, I can't fly all those guys in. So I got a set of drums there and a library. So all we need to do is say,
"That's great.
Let's go," and we're ready. And I get all the good players because they love to play.
Yeah,
they like to play.
Sure do. Recently heard the Slide Hampton Big Band in New York.
Yeah,
and
that's wonderful.
Quite some adventuresome writing there.
That's great.
How did the, I meant to ask this earlier on, but how did the double bass drum set come to fruition? Yeah.
Well, you know, Eddie Shaughnessy came to me once and he said, "Hey, did you really start the 2 bass drums? I thought you did, but did Ray McKinley do it first?" I said, "Well, I don't know, because when I was a youngster, in 1938, I drew the plans for the double bass drum kit. And around 1940, I saw in Downbeat where Ray McKinley was teamed with Will Bradley. They had a band together. They did a lot of boogie-woogie things. And there was a picture of him with just 2 bass drums, see? And so when I saw Ray after that, I said, "Ray, were you the first one to do that?" He said, "No, you were the first one." So, you know, we were playing gentlemen.
Yeah,
there,
right.
But I think Ray said it. He said, "Well, if you drew the plans in 38, then you're the first one." Because what I did, I just did a thing with just the 2 bass drums, but you came out with a whole set.
The whole set.
And the whole thing, see?
Yeah.
So the players that followed me on that were Eddie Shaughnessy, and then Sam Woodyard, Billy Cobham, quite a few drummers after that, you know.
Right.
But I got that idea because having been some kind of a so-called tap dancer years ago, this side of the body was as strong as this side. And I always wanted to get a drum sound over here, not only the hi-hat, but another drum sound. So I figured, well, I can put both pedals over here, and I'll have the duo sound with the bass drums, and still have the hi-hat, and still have the snare drum and the tom-toms and the cymbals here. So that was the general idea. Solo-wise, there's no limit to what you can do. In a band, playing sambas and everything, you can get a lot of interesting sounds and also setups for the band. But there were some time when I didn't use that bass drum at all, the left one. A lot of times I used it, but I had to use my musicality and my taste to make sure it's done the right way.
Yeah, because otherwise it could...
It proved to be standardized equipment now, so a lot of people are using it. A lot of these youngsters are playing it too. I mean, really, they really got the technique and the feel and everything.
It must have helped to have been a tap dancer, I would think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Have you ever had occasion to play with Joe Williams?
Joe Williams?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There is an example. Well, he's such a great talent. But what makes Joe Williams so great is that not only is he one of the greatest singers in the world, but when he comes in to rehearse, he comes in like a gentleman. He knows exactly what he wants to rehearse, what he wants to work out. He does it. He's in and out with no problems. That to me is a real artist. You know, because he knows exactly what the band should sound like, what the dynamics should be, what he wants from the drummer, and he does it in a relationship like a love relationship. Here, let's all work together and get this thing going. He does it in and out. I love working with him. Tony Bennett is another guy like that. Basie was the same way. Ellington, those kind of performers, they know exactly what they want to do. Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show always told me he never had trouble with the biggies. Ella Fitzgerald would come on the show, Joe Williams, Tony Bennett, Duke, whoever it was, Dizzy, in and out. it was always that person that didn't quite make it. Something's wrong with the dressing room.
Started
I don't have
demanding
a room in the
things.
dressing room. I don't have
Yeah.
a window in the dressing room. I don't have, something, the band's too loud. This is and of course, that's the last time you saw them.
Oh my. Did you once record something with Basie called The Happiest Millionaire or something?
I think
Do you
I did.
recall that?
I think I did.
And there was
that.
some sound you used with some drumsticks or something.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
used jingle sticks.
Jingle sticks.
What I did quite a few years ago, I took the jingles off the tambourine and put them on a drumstick.
Mm-hmm.
And Basie used to call them bells. I like those bells. Give me those bells, you know.
Yeah.
He loved that sound.
Yeah.
I designed them strictly for maybe bossa novas and
Mhm.
Latin things. But then I found out later on it's good for certain swing things too. And Basie loved him. It was a nice sound.
Nice touch.
Different sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's in the immediate future? I know you're playing tonight,
Yeah.
which I'm looking forward to. Where do you go from here?
From here, we go back to San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
Francine and I live in San Jose part of the time, and part of the time down in Sherman Oaks, that's near LA. And we're home for 2 days in San Jose, then we're off to Michigan, Ypsilanti, Michigan. I'm playing with a college band there, a big
Mhm.
jazz band, and I'm doing a piece written for me with a percussion ensemble. So I'm doing two things, and then also a clinic for all the drummers. And then from there, we come back home, go down to LA, and we get ready to go to Montana to play a gig up there. And then we get ready to go to Bern, Switzerland with the New York band, the whole band.
All right. All right.
And we're backing up Manhattan Transfer on three of those concerts, and one alone with the band. And Clark Terry and Milt Hinton also, if he's up to it, will
Mhm.
be our guests with our band. So we got a lot of exciting things going on.
Oh, you gentlemen do get around, I'll tell you.
We
that.
keep on going. My wife keeps saying, "When we going home? When we going home?"
Wow. I'm sure you've been around the world a number of times.
Well, just about. I haven't been to China yet or South America.
Uh-huh.
I had the occasion to go to both places, but I was always, busy here in the States.
Yeah.
But someday I'll make that, and then pretty much so.
Yeah, you'll have it
cover all
covered.
the territory. Yeah.
Gee.
But it's great fun when you're doing something that you really love to
That you
do.
love.
It's a lot of fun, and as long as I can keep doing it, I'll be hitting rim shots and pressing cymbals. Oh yeah, I got a new CD now that was just released on Concord, and I've always been wanting to do this. It's a salute or an honoring 12 great drummers.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them from the back era, and some are in the present state, and a few of them are still living. Like starting with Chick Webb, Big Sid Catlett, Joe Jones, Buddy, Gene, Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, Shelly Manne, and Steve Gadd are the new guys, and Dennis
Wow.
Chambers. And it's not so much drum solos, but the caption on their album is "Their time was the greatest."
Uh-huh.
It's sort of like grooving what they did in the band. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of wonderful big band, and eventually they're going to put another CD out without me, so that the student can put the headset on and have the drum parts
Uh-huh.
and play along with that band.
Oh, boy. That's quite a project.
Yeah.
Try to capture all
the
those.
The album is out now, and disc jockeys are really enjoying
Mhm.
playing it. The band is really superb. Their performance was exceptionally well.
Great.
Really, really nice.
Looking forward to getting that for the college.
Yeah.
And we should have you at Hamilton sometime.
All right.
You know?
Sure.
Maybe after the China trip.
Okay.
Let us know.
That's good. That's great.
Well, this has really been fascinating, and thanks for fitting us into what's been a busy day here in Sarasota.
Well, thank you. I always say when you want to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is music,
Yeah.
I can go on and
Right.
on and on, you know,
Okay.
and having a lot of fun. And by the way, now I have the luxury of saying that they have a festival named after me
Hmm.
in Moline, Rock Island, and Davenport. And they have it around May every year. This is the third one coming up. Ours is May the 19th this year. And Clark Terry was in on the second one. He did such a great job, he's coming back for the third one.
I'll be darned.
We do it with a local band there, and we're starting to pull in different people,
Mhm.
and it looks like we're getting the right proper backing, and we're having a lot of fun with that. It's great.
That's good news. Well, thanks so much on behalf of Hamilton College. I want to thank Louis Belson for a great hour of conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.